We know now that, again, the companies that are investing in resource productivity are the healthiest companies in the economy. And as the cost of resources goes up, piece yesterday, International Energy Agency was very interested in what you did in defeating Prop 23. Yeah, give yourselves a hand. Well done, California. That was important for California's economy. The chief economist of the International Energy Agency said that was critical for the global fight on climate protection, because if the oil companies were allowed to defeat what California is trying to do, and oil consumption continues to go up, we're going to run out of oil. Now, this is news for those of us who have been following the IEA, because for years, decades, the IEA has been saying, oh, the world's awash in oil. There's plenty of the stuff. Until last fall, when a couple guys who had worked at the IEA came out in an article in the London Guardian, the UK Guardian, and said, the IEA has been cooking its books. The British government said, say what? We base our national accounts on IEA numbers. What's going on? These guys said the IEA was trying to pleasure the past American administration and keep the world out of panic, because there's actually a lot less oil than the IEA numbers have been saying. The British government commissioned an industry task force chaired by the managing director of Royal Dutch Shell. The IEA came out with a report in December on the Brits asked the IEA where the numbers come from. The IEA said, well, they're assumptions, but we'll do a real study. The study issued in December saying, well, within 3 to 4 years, expect a plateauing of oil extraction and then a steady decline. This is not good news for oil-using entities. The Brits came out with their report in March urging an immediate transition to green transportation. Imagine your company, your community, your state, this country, if oil prices hit $5 a gallon again. And that could happen. That could happen tomorrow if somebody blew the oil loading arms at Ras Tanura and Juaima in Saudi Arabia. It will happen over the next 3 to 4 years if we don't begin using oil dramatically more efficiently. And that's why the IEA was paying attention to what you guys did here in California. So again, thank you.
So talking about oil and talking about, thank you. Thinking a little bit more globally now, there's a lot of businesses here who face that, face the oil price, face transportation costs and supply chain costs. How do you think about sustainability when you think about bringing in manufactured goods from China and sort of quote unquote exporting our footprint? Is there a way to think about producing sustainably in the US, or can it be also done in China and shipped over here?
Sure. There's several answers to that question. One is companies as Walmart are beginning to look at their global footprint. And 2 years ago, Walmart hired a little group called the Carbon Disclosure Project to go to China to ask Chinese factories, what's your carbon footprint? Walmart's looking at its carbon footprint globally because it realizes that it is vulnerable to rises in any of the costs of getting the goods here. I mean, Walmart's business model is selling cheap pink fuzzy slippers from China. Maybe not. Walmart is starting to think about how does it source locally. And this is something that those of you who manufacture, who are interested in selling to Walmart, should be aware of. Walmart has an IT capacity that is, as you might imagine, world-class. And they can source locally in a heartbeat. They have all the IT ready to do that. This is a competitive advantage for those of you who manufacture stuff with a shorter travel footprint. Now, there are ways of moving stuff around that are dramatically less carbon intensive. For example, sky sails. Hang a great big kite off the front end of a boat, and it helps drag the boat through the water. Mitsubishi Heavy Industries has discovered they can get a 10% increase in the fuel efficiency of their big ships by emitting bubbles at the front end of the boat, which breaks the friction and allows the boat to go through the water better. There are all manner of efficiency improvements that we can start implementing if we just start paying attention.
Excellent. So no longer bottled water is going to be an issue, but carbonated water in the ocean is going to be our big point to tackle. A couple other questions that are coming from the audience, and this is especially relevant since we have the folks from Emeryville High School here today. Do you have any suggestions about teaching our young people? So you first started writing about this in the 70s when there was a big groundswell of cultural sort of attitudes here. There's been a pause in that, and now you have a young population that's very passionate. How do we capture that, and how do we help increase that knowledge and help teach others?
I'm not sure that we are the right ones to teach the young people. I think it's rather the other way round. I think young people, those of you under 25 in the audience, raise your hands.
Wow.
How many of you, keep your hands up, how many of you are wearing watches? Those of you over 25 that wear watches, raise your hand. The young people have a different way of looking at the world. Now, why would you wear a watch? It's a single function device. You have the little crackberry there that gives you all of these functions. How do you learn? If you want to know something, do you wait for the W edition of the Encyclopedia Britannica to show up at your house 3 months from now? What is the Encyclopedia Britannica? That's how we used to learn. If we're sitting in a class and a teacher says something and we don't quite know what it is, we can either stick our hand up and make a fool out of ourselves, or we can wait for the W edition of the Encyclopedia Britannica, or we pick up our Crackberry or iPad or whatever and Google it and find the answer right now. Yeah, iPad right there. I would submit the way in which we do education is, by and large, as wasteful as the way in which we deal with the flow of stuff through the economy. Most education is warehousing. It's what do we do with the kids while the parents are off at work? And how do we socialize young people to behave themselves, more or less? Suppose we reframe education. And a group of us have just come together. In fact, I'll leave here and go to a meeting over in the city of some very big minds. A guy who was the managing director at Google.org, researcher from UC Berkeley, some academics, about suppose education were TED Talks on steroids, where you go online, say the group here sits in a coffee shop down the street, goes online, brings up a TED Talk, watches it, or you watch it at home, and then you come together, and for the next hour or so you discuss what that TED Talk was, and then all of you write blog posts so that the rest of us become smarter about what it is that you've just learned. And you can get a microcredit at college or high school for having done that. There are ways that we can do education that are dramatically more effective, fast, deliver the content that we need. All of MIT's first-year courses are now online. But how many of you have downloaded and watched them? Just putting something online isn't enough, and we need to find ways of having conversations, of coming together face-to-face, which is what's great about education when it works. But how many of you have sat through incredibly boring lectures in 500-person lecture halls? And how many of you can tell me what it was you learned in the 7th grade?
2 people can.
Because they're in the 8th grade. I mean, I was teaching at Dartmouth, walking along across the campus, and this student came by wearing a shirt on which was written, "Reunite Gondwanaland," obviously in the geology department. And I almost said, you realize that the plate tectonics theory has been disproven, because that's what I learned in the 8th grade. It occurred to me to shut up and go Google it. Son of a gun, plate tectonics is now considered the conventional wisdom. I'm wondering how much of what I learned is wrong. And I've learned now when I'm about to cite something, pull out the Crackberry, Google it, and like, yeah, okay, that's right. The organization that we're launching is called the Madrone Project. Watch for it. We're going to try and transform education.
Great. Thank you. So you mentioned that a lot of what you've learned has changed, and I think one thing that we can agree on across generations is that everything is connected, right? None of these issues can stand singularly, and we have to address them together. A question coming from the audience is, realizing that, and realizing that businesses are faced with that complexity, is there any issue that you feel is most critical? You know, is it toxins? Is it energy efficiency? Is it recycling? Is it oil, water conservation? Is there anything that you think is most critical, knowing that everything is critical?
Everything is critical, and the most critical issue for each one of you is the issue that you can do something about. And there will be that for every one of you. When you leave the building today, think to yourself, what is it that today I can do to make a difference? I wear a set of dog tags, one of which says climate justice, one of which says tick, 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 the clock is ticking, and one of which says 10-10. This is a European initiative. 10% reduction this year. And they're calling on the world's people, 10% reduction. Now, many of these businesses that we are here to celebrate have achieved a great deal more than 10%. But if all that you can do is 10%, that's 10% better than you were doing yesterday. So find what it is that you care about and live a life that shows it.
That's great. Thank you. I think all of us here are very fortunate to be in the Bay Area, to be living a life that we're passionate about in a place we're passionate about. And I'd like to take a moment here to have all of us thank Hunter Lovins for joining us here today.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was great. Thank you.
My pleasure.